and it's their intrinsic
nature. This food basically robs.
Sound feasible, sound like discovered called Catalhoyuk in Turkey. Now, what they found in this city was that it was no signs of war. Again, no signs of war. No signs that they had to build any kind of fortress, that they had any kind of walls protecting the city. In fact, the houses that they lived in, as you can see in the depiction, look more like apartments. They lived close together. These people had no kind of social structure. They wasn't ruled by any kings or queens or anything like that. The closest thing to religion or any kind of ruler that we find is this figurine or this statue that they call the Great Mother. This is what they find there. They find this, in a lot of places. But there's no signs that there was any kind of war or anything. Everybody lived peacefully. They grew peas, they grew barley, they grew wheat, they grew almonds, they grew pistachios, and they raised sheep. No signs of warfare. Now we're talking about, this goes back 9,000 BCE, when they said that the world was basically filled of war. It wasn't safe to go anywhere. Everybody was living in fear, and kingdoms was fighting against each other. But here we find one of the oldest civilizations, Catalhoyuk, where the people live in close quarters. It was, they think it was a matriarchal society, but from the depictions that they find, everybody lived peacefully, everything was fine. There's the bones, when they dug up the bodies of the people, because they buried them like in the floor, none of the bodies had any signs of trauma or war. The people died peacefully. Some of the bodies they found had no skulls. That was symbolic of some kind of maybe some kind of ritual or something that they did with some of the skulls, but there was no trauma or no signs of any kind of war or any kind of violence in this civilization. Now understand, there has been a movement that has been going on for decades, for a very long time, that has been kept out of the public, kept out of the media, and a lot of people have no clue of this movement. It's a bunch of researchers, archaeologists, scientists, who have found civilizations all over the world of nothing but women. They have dug up figurines inside of these caves and inside of places all over the world where you find these figurines. Look at these, of nothing but women, all kinds of shapes and sizes. Women all over the place. When you go back far, when you start digging deep, you find nothing but women. Now, in the civilizations where men started to come on the scene, we find that it was matriarchal civilizations where the woman basically ruled. And the depictions show that the job of the men was they went out, they hunted, they actually watched the kids, everything was cool, but it shows that it was an equality there and that the man respected the woman. Now, we find this again in ancient Egypt. We know that the ancient Egyptians, the men worshiped the women as gods. But now, going back here, they have been founding these civilizations for a long time. A woman named Maria Gambutis, if any of you have seen her videos, she has been talking about this stuff for years. She's an archaeologist, and she has put out many books on all of the matriarchal societies that they are covering up. They called this woman crazy, said that she's some kind of feminist and this and that, but she has the proof. They can say what they want, but not just her, other people have the proof. The archaeologists had the proof that there was nothing but women. I mean, it's so many depictions and figurines that they found throughout the world that show that at some point, long time ago, nothing but women was here. And then it's actually, I wish I had more time to get into this, so I might do a video on it later, but it's actually showing, it's almost a timeline where you can see where it's nothing but women. I mean, you can see the kind of things that they talked about and how they lived. I mean, they drew this stuff, they depicted it. And when you see men start coming in the picture, what their role was, I mean, this stuff is everywhere and nobody is talking about it. The news media won't touch it, of course. Nobody wants to point this stuff out. But it's important and, where we're headed at, because everything is going to tie in together. So now in Maria Gambuta's books, she talks about all of these civilizations that they have found. Remember, she's an archaeologist. She has a team, they went around, they have dug up and found so many matriarchal civilizations and civilizations of just women. So many depictions of just, women interacting with women, lesbians. You get this whole big, anybody who's a lesbian, you get this whole put down of being a lesbian and this and that. That's all that went on in the ancient world. It was no men, so women got together with women, and they have depictions of that. We're talking about ancient depictions of women and women because it was a natural thing. There was no men, so women got down with women. It's ancient, it's old. This is something that was taking place long before modern day society. It is a normal action, as Maria Gambutta points out in her book. Now, the thing is, why this is important, that they found all these matriarchal societies and all these civilizations of nothing but women. This is important because in all of the civilizations of just women, when they started to dig up the graves of the women, they find depictions, or they find that they worship snakes and serpents and birds. Serpents and birds. So here you go, the urea. You have a serpent, you have a bird on a double urea. Same thing, the double urea. You have a serpent, you have a bird. This is what they find in all of the graves of these ancient women. Not in the men's. When you dig up the men, it's nothing. And they find that it is replete throughout the ancient world in these civilizations of just women, that they was in some kind of communication, or that they worship these serpent gods. Researchers believe that these women was worshiping the serpent or the reptilian because of parthenogenesis. Now we know with parthenogenesis that they could reproduce without the aid of a male, and we know reptiles can reproduce without males. Now obviously these women was reproducing without men because there was no men around. So as I keep saying, you cannot get a man without a woman, period. Everybody begins life as a female. Now, men are basically a mutation of a female. That's all we are. What happens between the 6th to 8th week of pregnancy, you have the secretion of testosterone. It is this secretion of testosterone that causes the female to change into a male. So what happens is the ovaries drop and become testicles. The clitoris elongates and becomes a penis. It is the female skin gland that actually produces exactly the same as the male fertile seed. The skin gland is the source of female ejaculation. So females already have eggs, just like reptilians or birds lay eggs. Females already have eggs. Now we have been told that she cannot reproduce without the aid of a male fertile seed, but she already has the seed. So everything a man is and will ever be comes from a woman. So what makes you think anything that a man can give a woman, she doesn't already have? Now, we don't know exactly what happened for women to start secreting testosterone and start producing men. Some people say it has something to do with the moon or something to do with nature, but we really don't know what really took place for women to start producing men. And a lot of people think it was a need for something, that nature required her to produce something more masculine to either fight or to hunt or what have you. But we don't know it. But you can understand now why they will want to hide the history of females, that they are the first here, because everybody believed, and we know the ancient Egyptians talked about this, that the female could decide whether she would have a male or a female. The Egyptians talked about if a woman was on the spiritual level, she could produce without a male, but they could also decide if it's going to be male or female. So if the woman ever woke up and realized what she can do and who she is, she could basically birth the man out of existence. Birth the man out of existence. So this is obviously a problem. If you're trying to take over the leadership role, or take away the role of women being, the leader, then this is something you would not ever want her to know. As I've said before, 666, the man is evil. Man, not just woman and man, men. we see when men start coming onto the scene that things start to go downhill. Testosterone, the same thing that was secreted to create us, is the reason why we are so violent. Everybody always say, too much testosterone in the room. That's a fact. Now, the Greek meaning or the Greek word for female birth is jinn. Now, you'll find in the English language that every word that has jinn in it, that begins with G-E-N or has G-E-N in it, usually means birth or male or woman or beginning or, energy or something like that. It always has something to do with production or, male or female or birth. So when you look at words like, or beginning. So when you look at words like gender or genesis or parthenogenesis, generation, genetics, Gentiles, genitalia, gene, genealogy, genome, genocide, which is the killing of men and women. When you start looking at all these gen words, you'll find that it has something to do with the female. It all goes back to her because the female is the creator of all. She created man, she created woman, and that's what they do not want you to understand. So again, we know that this has all been covered up. And if it ever comes out and the women ever realize what they can do, as I said, they could birth man out of existence. Now, this makes you look more closely at the Egyptian culture because they worship the women as gods. They're the only culture that we can find where, except for when you go back a little bit further, but we can see how, the women played major roles in Egyptian society. So now understand, where does this all lead us? It leads us all back to the Egyptian culture, the ancient Egyptian culture. After all of this stuff happened, when there was nothing but females, the men start coming on the scene. What you find is little skirmishes here and there when men start meeting with other men and, they start fighting and, little wars start to happen. But this is all when men come on the scene leading up to the ancient Egyptian culture. And the reason why I say this really goes back to them is because we find pyramids all over the world. I mean, they are everywhere and nobody is really addressing that. I mean, it's pyramids everywhere. We know in Japan has that underwater pyramid. They got all these structures, Egyptian structures underwater. China, they have mummies in China. I mean, the whole culture of Egypt is right there in China. They have pyramids, mummies, everything. Remember in Japan as well, they had mummies, but Japan was also about to build a big giant pyramid structure called Shimishu, I believe it was, which means a city in a pyramid. And they're about to build this large pyramid over the water with a bunch of cities in it. So pyramids is very important, even still to this day, is on our money. We know the so-called Illuminati or what have you use it in their logo, or everybody throws up the diamond. I mean, everything has to do with pyramids all over the place. The all-seeing eye in a pyramid, everything. So we know that these pyramids, supposedly after they've done the research in Egypt, supposed to have been like some kind of source for wireless electricity. And we can assume that the other pyramids around the world that they found could do the same thing. Now, nobody is talking about this. And it's one of the things that boggles my mind about, pyramids they found in Alaska. Supposed to be a pyramid somewhere in Antarctica. Supposed to be pyramids on the moon and on Mars. I mean, this pyramid thing is something that a lot of people just, you have to pay attention to that because it's the key. Remember, China won't even let nobody in to see their pyramids. And a little bit they do let people see is, they handpick those people, but they don't let people go in too far. So we don't know what's there. We don't really know what's in Japan. It's the secret, the key I'm convinced of has to do with these damn pyramids. Seriously. The ancient Egyptian culture is where this whole thing where we really can get the information from. And as we go along, I know I keep saying as we go along, but it's a lot more that I wish I could fit all in this video, but I can't, which is why I got to do a part 3. But it's important, these pyramids, and I honestly think you can see that now today more than ever. Now, as I keep showing you how the Greeks basically steal Egyptian mythology and steal the culture to, show who they really are, or to, switch it around to create something from it. Now, the thing is this, when you go back to antiquity, when you go back to ancient Egypt, now the official story, what they will tell us in books, that's like official books, that, really everything kind of stops with Kemet. And then, before that, they'll get into Neanderthals and cavemen and dinosaurs, but they really don't go much into people, so much, except from saying that, it was wars and people was fighting back then. That's why there's no real record, because there was too much wars going on. But something happened on this planet. We don't know what it was. We don't know exactly what it was, but every culture, every civilization speaks of the world being destroyed by fire and water. Everybody speaks of a flood. It was this massive flood, and the world was destroyed with fire. Then it was a flood, and people had to retreat or live underground for a long period of time, and people lived in the mountains. But most of the people of the world was killed. They was wiped out. Some people survived. So, hundreds, thousands, who knows how many years later, the people who survived, the ancestors now of the people who first went into these caves and mountains, the ones who survived, they come out hundreds, thousands of years later after the waters subsided and after stuff started growing again, I guess, and they tried to basically reestablish civilization. So now understand, the only place we can really look to figure out what happened is in the ancient world. We can look at ancient Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, a lot of these ancient civilizations who told stories about, shape-shifting serpents. Some of these serpents were giants, stories of dragons. I've shown you all the little depictions and carvings of, shape-shifting beings and lizards and dragons and snakes and all kinds of stuff that we find in the ancient world. They didn't carve this stuff for nothing. It was trying to tell a story. Now, you have stories about the old men of the sea or the men of old. You have stories about the world being destroyed by fire and water. You have the ancient Greek story of Zeus versus Typhonus. And that's an interesting story when you read, because it really gets into, this whole flood and fire. And we know that they basically parabolized the truth and created these Greek mythology or ancient Egyptian stories to tell us what happened. So I want to read briefly from Voices from Legendary Times by Ellen Lloyd. It's a book you definitely need to read. Now, this is about the whole fight, the whole war between Zeus and Typhonus or Typhoon. So now it says here, a very famous and horrifying god in Greek mythology is the snake god Typhonus or Typhoon, the Greek version of the Egyptian god Set. Typhon was a rebel who fought against the mighty Zeus. When Zeus thought that he had finally won the battle over the Titans and was ready to claim victory, a new enemy joined the battle, fighting on the Titan side. Now this is Typhon, this is the snake god. It was the horrific snake god Typhon, fully equipped with wings, which gave him the potential to fly just as good and effortlessly as Zeus. Typhon is described in the Greek text as a real monster. Strength was with his hands and all that he did, and the feet of the strong god were untiring. From his shoulders grew 100 heads of a snake, a fearful dragon with dark flickering tongues from under the brow of his eyes. And his marvelous heads, fire flashed and fire burned from his heads as he glared, and there were voices in all his dreadful heads which uttered incredible sounds. It was an intensive war. Both sides did their best to win. Still, Zeus was the one who first got a direct hit on the target by using his lurid thunderbolt. The weapon buried all the marvelous heads of the monster, all that were around him. The result was that Typhon's flying machine crashed down to Earth. So, flying machine, did he have wings or did he have a flying machine? This is why I'm saying it's parabolized. It's trying to tell you something. So, it goes on to say, when Zeus had vanquished him and lashed him with strokes, Typhonus was hurled down, a maimed wreck. The huge earth groaned. A flame shot forth from the stricken lord in the dim, rugged, seleucid valley of the mount where he was smitten. A great part of huge earth was scorched by the terrible vapor, melting as tin melts when heated by man's art. In the glow of a blazing fire did the earth melt down. Though the aerial vehicle was destroyed, Typhon himself did survive the crash. The fight between the snake god and Zeus continued. Various weapons were deployed and different places was used as battlefields. It was a battle for life and death. which Zeus at the end managed to win, defeating his enemy Typhon. Another well-known Greek god was Triton, meaning 1/3, the son of Poseidon. He too was of the old men of the sea, having a tail of a fish and head of a man. Both he and his father Poseidon are often depicted accompanied with dolphins. In the Gigantomachy, the great battle between Zeus and Typhon, one sees him at battle beside his father Poseidon, and the terrible sound of his conch shell make the gods' adversaries flee. It is he who made the flood waters recede, while Zeus, appeased, yielded the earth to the human race. It seems that Poseidon delegated to him a part of his powers. He could, to his liking, with the call of his conch, raise up or calm the waves of the sea. He shook the rock with his trident and made islands spring up from the ocean's depth like other marine gods, notably Nereus and Proteus. He possessed the gift of prophecy.